I tried a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon FireRed for the very first time. Of course, I used to play Pokémon Leaf Green all the time as a kid, and I've done some Nuzlocking, but have only completed one hardcore Nuzlocke before, on Brilliant Diamond. So I thought it would be fun to retry a classic with hardcore Nuzlocke rules in place and see how we fare. The full rule set will be listed below, but in a hardcore Nuzlocke, you can only catch the first Pokemon in each route or area. If a Pokemon faints, it is gone forever. There's no overleveling past the gym leader's ace, no items in battle, and the battle mode must be put on set at all times. Will we reign victorious, or will it end in tragic despair? For now, the only thing we have to worry about is choosing a starter Pokemon. I love how this game is so emblematic of life. Your troubles start off so humble, like choosing a starter Pokemon, and then before you know it, you have to defeat a criminal organization from taking over the world, just like life. For this run, I choose Bulbasaur and name it Kashi. Our rival, that guy, then challenges us to battle. And let's face it, this battle is always just one big coin flip. I try to play this coin flip battle strategically and go for a growl, and Charmander retaliates with a scratch. I then go on the offensive with Tackle for what admittedly is pitiful damage. Charmander then goes for Growl so we can do even less damage, great. We then keep trading off scratches and tackles, and I'm wondering if this is already the end of attempt 1. But in the last minute, Kashi gets a clutch critical hit against the Charmander, taking it down. Let's go. Take that guy. Turns out, we have a calm Bulbasaur, which is great because doing a hardcore Nuzlocke for the first time can be very nerve-wracking, and we're going to need that calming presence. A calm nature raises our special defense and lowers our attack, which honestly isn't bad at all. Maybe not ideal for the poison type moves, but we're mostly going to be using grass type attacking moves anyway. I find it weird that the only thing our mom says to us is that our Pokemon are tired and we should take a rest. Like, don't you want to just ask me how my day is going, or talk to me, or love me? We then forge ahead to Route 1 to find our first encounter, which ends up being a Pidgey. We catch it and name it Cheerio, which has a docile nature. On Route 2, I catch a Rattata and name it Rice Krispie, which has a serious nature. And then, on Route 22, I catch a Mankey and name it Cinnamon Toast Crunch, with a gentle nature. Plus special defense, but minus defense, which I guess is fine. I'm not going to be mentioning every single encounter I come across in this run since we're not doing a monotype challenge, but I'm sure that this is the beginning of a long and beautiful friendship here with Cinnamon. Nah, just kidding. Of course we lose Cinnamon Toast Crunch to a critical hit from a Rattata. Rattata are freaking monstrous in the early game, and just the game in general. Youngster Joey was onto something. In Viridian Forest, I catch us a Weedle and name it Honey Nut. You know, like Honey Nut Cheerios, and it's gonna evolve eventually into a Beedrill, and alright, listen, don't come at me, okay? In preparation for the first gym battle, Honey Nut eventually evolves into a terrifying Beedrill. Since we have 4 Pokemon at our disposal, and all of them are above that guy's level cap, the battle with him on Route 22 is mostly skippable. We eventually arrive in Pewter City, and for the first gym battle, I decided to have everyone exactly 1 level below the level cap, since the Cerulean and Vermilion gyms especially have tight level caps with a bunch of things to do in between. The first gym leader is Brock, and I'm sure you can imagine how this goes. I lead with Kashi and Brock leads with Geodude. Geodude is an easy one-hit KO with Vine Whip. Onix comes out next, and I know he'll outspeed, so he goes for Bind, and he misses. Vine Whip then is an easy one-hit KO on the Onix, gaining us our first gym badge in this hardcore Nuzlocke. We then continue to Route 3, where an aide finally grants us our running shoes, which I'm not sure why before getting the first gym badge we were seen as too irresponsible to have these running shoes, but at the Route 4 Pokemon Center, I talked to this man and paid the outrageous price of $500 for a Magikarp, giving it the name Captain Crunch. While in Mount Moon, I grab us our next encounter, a Geodude named Cocoa Puff. Cocoa Puff has a naive nature, which is plus speed and minus special defense. Not the greatest, since the Geodude line isn't traditionally very speedy, and the special defense is already lacking, but we'll work with it. While in Mount Moon, we also pick up the Thief TM, which will be amazing for grabbing type boosting items off wild Pokemon. I teach it to Rice Krispie, and actually got the idea to backtrack to Route 3, where I keep searching for wild Jigglypuff, because they sometimes hold Oran berries on them. Berries are incredibly hard to find in this game, so I do this until I get about 10 or so Oran berries before this route becomes closed off to me for a little while. Before facing Misty, we get a whole slew of wicked evolutions, as Kashi evolves into an Ivysaur, Cheerio into a Pidgeotto, Rice Krispie into a Raticate, and Captain Crunch into a Gyarados. The next gym leader is Misty, and while it seems easy enough to just spam Vine Whip with Kashi, Both Staryu and Starmie are faster than Kashi, and I didn't want a combination of confusion from Staryu's Water Pulse and gaining health back with Recover to mess things up in the slightest. So I tried a bit of a different strategy. I lead with Honey Nut, and the first thing I do is fire off a Twin Needle. It brings her into the red, and then she goes for Harden. This causes her to heal, and I go for a second Twin Needle, which doesn't do as much damage thanks to the Harden, but it poisons her. Okay. Doesn't matter too much though, because another Twin Needle takes it down. In comes the Starmie and goes for Water Pulse, but thankfully no confusion, so we're able to get off a String Shot. I then go for a second String Shot, and she goes for another Water Pulse. This time it confuses us, but we heal thanks to a Person Berry I found on Route 4. We're in the range for a kill though, so I decide to go to Kashi. She fires off a Water Pulse, but thankfully again no confusion. We now outspeed and are able to put it to sleep with a Sleep Powder. I then go for a Leech Seed, which thankfully connects, while the Starmie stays asleep. I then go for Vine Whip, which brings it to about half, and the Starmie stays asleep. The Leech Seed then brings it down a little further, so a second Vine Whip is enough to take it out. Gotta give mad props to Honey Nut for T-balling that for Kashi. The second gym badge is ours. We then head north to battle that guy at the bridge, but I'm not kidding you, Cocoa Puff decimates his entire team. What an absolute beast. On Route 24, we find ourselves in Oddish and name it Kix. We then help Bill unpokefuse himself, which makes him reward us with a ticket to get on a boat and okay, what is this game? Defeating this rocket grunt outside the ransacked house grants us the Dig TM, which I'm sure will come in handy soon enough. On Route 5, we go to look for our next encounter, a Meowth, which I catch and nickname Lucky Charm. It has the pickup ability instead of Technician, but I'm not going to be using him very much in battle anyway, so the pickup ability will be helpful in acquiring random berries and items here and there. We arrive in Vermilion City and visit the Diglett Cave to find ourselves a, well, you guessed it, Diglett. We catch it and name it Reese's Puff. Next we take on the SS Anne, fighting a bunch of trainers and accumulating some pretty insane items like the Brick Break TM and finding some berries in the trash. Yum. We then have our battle with that guy here on the SS Anne. He leads with a Pidgeotto and I lead with Cocoa Puff. That guy immediately fires off a Sand Attack, and of course we miss our Rock Throw because of it. He goes for another Sand Attack, but thankfully our second Rock Throw connects to take it out. Charmeleon comes in next, and of course goes for Smokescreen. I go for a Magnitude, but obviously it misses. I decide to switch to Captain Crunch, which gives an attack drop on Charmeleon thanks to Intimidate, and Charmeleon goes for a Growl. I go for Bite, which does about a quarter, and then he goes for Smokescreen. I didn't teach Captain Crunch Water Pulse yet, because since these TMs are single use in this game, I try to conserve them for as long as I can while we have limited resources. This ends up being a back and forth of bites and embers until the Charmeleon is eventually taken down, thankfully never getting burned along the way. That guy then sends out Raticate, and I go for Tackle, which misses. Of course, I should have known. He gets off a Tail Whip, and I decide it's time to switch since Raticate will have Strong Stab, or same type attack bonus, moves against us. I switch in Kashi, and Raticate gets off a Tail Whip. Raticate outspeeds and gets off another Tail Whip, and I use Razor Leaf to bring it over half. Raticate then goes for Hyper Fang, and Kashi goes down to a critical hit. I got so mad at myself. In retrospect, I made a mistake. I was moving too fast and just wanted to finish off the Raticate as quickly as possible. I knew he got the 2 Tail Whips off, crit or not, and my best bet was to switch into Cocoa Puff to tank the Hyper Fang and finish off the Raticate. Kashi was crucial for the first 2 gyms, and I was really looking forward to taking him all the way to the Elite Four, especially since I named him after my favorite cereal. But they don't say slow and steady wins the race for no reason. So, rest in peace, sweet Kashi. We'll always remember you. I then go to Cheerio to outspeed and finish off the Raticate with a Gust, and take out the Kadabra with 2 quick attacks. But that's a brutal loss with Kashi. Kix, looks like you're on the team now. After definitely not being disturbed by the scene of helping the sick sailor, we get the Cut HM and head to the Vermilion Gym, where we use a combination of Reese's Puff and Cocoa Puff, look at that, to clear the trainers and avoid going over the level cap with Cocoa Puff. It's time to take on Lieutenant Surge. And of course, we have the perfect counter. He leads with Voltorb and I lead with Cocoa Puff. Since Voltorb outspeeds, they get off a Screech while we burrow underground for a dig, which is an immediate one-hit KO. He then sends out Pikachu, and worrying about the upcoming Raichu's double team and potential quick attack damage, especially if we somehow miss our attacks and have our lower defense. I take this opportunity to raise our defense 3 times using Defense Curl while he uses double teams. Our first magnitude misses, but thankfully the second one connects to take out the Pokemon mascot. Should have been Geodude anyway. Last is Raichu, and he goes for Quick Attack, which does next to nothing. Then we use Magnitude, and it's a Magnitude 8, which immediately KOs him. That's 3 badges in the bag, or in the case thing, I guess. As a reward, after the battle, our beautiful Cocoa Puff evolves into a majestic Graveler, giving us some added bulk and strength to the team. Since I grew up with Leaf Green instead of Fire Red, I felt so excited to finally get my hands on a Growlithe. So I head to Route 8 where I finally... Right, so of course I completely forget about the fact that Growlithe has Roar. No matter, I'll just go over to Route 7 with some Great Balls in hand, and I know better now to just fire off Great Balls first thing. Surely this time I will... You've got to be kidding me. The good news is that we'll have another chance at Growlithe later on in the Pokemon Mansion, but for now I'm lacking a fiery presence in my team. Fortunately, I think I have the perfect solution. I head to Celadon City where I climb to the top of the Celadon Mansion to break into this man's home and steal his Eevee. I name the stolen Eevee Fruit Loop, and after a Firestone purchase from the Celadon department store, we have a beautiful Flareon on our team. The unfortunate part is that since we get the Eevee at level 25, we don't get access to Ember. And we can't learn Flamethrower until level 52. We do get Fire Spin at level 36 after the Celadon level cap, but you know. Having 0 patience, I sell all my life savings and whack a bunch of coins at Pokemon Wildlife to get us enough Game Corner coins to net us the Flamethrower TM. After that, it's time to take on Erica. You might think it would be easy enough to just spam Flamethrower on all of Erica's Pokemon, but there is a chance that Flamethrower won't kill the Victory Bell in one shot. And Erica has status moves left and right, plus Giga Drain on all 3 of her Pokemon, so I came up with a bit of a different strategy. I lead with Captain Crunch and right away go for her Dragon Rage. She uses Stun Spore, but my held Cherry Berry heals that right away. I go for a second Dragon Rage to bring her into the red, and of course, she uses a second Stun Spore to paralyze us. I'm in a bit of a tough spot here as she heals with a Hyper Potion, because now I'm paralyzed, plus she can spam Giga Drain. But by the grace of Arceus, I proceed to break through paralysis and connect the next 3 Dragon Rages. The third of which takes out the Victory Bell, even though she did in fact use Giga Drain all 3 times. Next comes out Tangela. I now switch to Fruit Loop since it has Constrict, but thankfully it just goes for Ingrain, literally the best thing it could have gone for. I then use Flamethrower to immediately take it out. Last up is Vileplume, and I go for Flamethrower, which brings her into the red, but we get a burn, baby. She goes for a Stun Spore, which comically misses, but the burn is enough to take it out anyway, netting us our 4th gym badge. Vileplume is such a lousy Pokemon. I never ever recommend using it. Right after the battle, I head to the Celadon department store to get us a Leaf Stone, which I can use to evolve Kix into a Vileplume. What power! At this point, the only move that Gloom can learn that Vileplume can't is Moonlight, but since we have Giga Drain, I figure we're okay to skip Moonlight. There's not much to report from Rocket Hideout, but Kix is immediately able to demonstrate his power by handling Giovanni quite well, with a bit of assistance from Cocoa Puff. Captain Crunch absolutely rips through that guy's entire team, and with the help of the Silph Scope that we got from defeating Giovanni, we can get our next encounter, a Ghastly named Cookie Crisp. Cookie Crisp has a timid nature, which the plus speed is great, but the minus attack isn't since all ghost moves are physical in this game. But I'm determined to Eevee Train the hell out of this thing and make it the best sweeper it can be. Unless I lose it to a critical hit bite from Meowth. You know what they say, everything done in haste goes to waste. That's basically a rehash of what I already said earlier, but whatever. The good news is that I'm able to go up to Rock Tunnel where I can find this move tutor who teaches Rock Slide. I teach it to Cocoa Puff for some extra power. On Route 12, I use the Poké Flute to awaken Snorlax and thankfully catch it, naming it Weedy. He has a docile nature, which is honestly a-okay with me. I'm very excited to use him, especially for Sabrina and then Agatha later on. I spend some time on Route 8 grinding against Ekans and Drowsies for attack and special defense EVs respectively. My plan is to teach Weedy Shadow Ball to give us a great answer into Sabrina's Psychic types and Agatha's Ghost types, while keeping Body Slam as a great stab move. At level 36, our Cheerio evolves into a majestic Pidgeot, and at level 37, I trade evolved Cocoa Puff so that we can get a beastly Golem. Such a cool Pokemon that I never really was able to use growing up, so I'm excited about this. I taught the Return TM to Captain Crunch and the Aerial Ace TM to Cheerio, just in case we run into Minimize or Smokescreen shenanigans with Koga. Speaking of which, it's time to take on the Poison Master himself. Since Koga and Sabrina have the same level cap, I underleveled a bit for Koga's match, but with Cocoa Puff, there's not really much to worry about. A combination of Rock Slide and Magnitude really get the job done for all of Koga's team members. Thankfully, Muck's Minimize strategy didn't get out of hand. We did get poisoned at the end by Weezing, but it was already too late. This was a pretty easy and clean sweep by Cocoa Puff. That's Koga defeated. I then head to Saffron Study to take on the Fighting Dojo, and when deciding which Pokemon to steal from this establishment, I landed on Hitmonlee because since the physical special split hasn't happened yet, Hitmonchan can't really take advantage of the elemental punches, though I guess they could be helpful depending on your type matchups, so I try to steal Hitmonchan as well, but the game says better not to be greedy. I head back to Celadon to pick up the Shadow Ball TM for Weedy and teach it to him. Then I clear through the Silph building with Weedy's help against Giovanni, and we're granted a Master Ball from the President who tells us we should be quiet about using it. Listen man, if you don't tell anyone about my secrets, I won't tell anyone about yours. It's time to take on the Saffron Study Gym. But here is an example of how a simple oversight can make for a fatal mistake. You see, my plan was to sweep through most of Sabrina's gym with Weedy, figuring he could resist special moves from Psychic-type Pokemon, right? Well, I forget that one of these trainers has a Ghastly. The Ghastly of course is faster and lands a Confuse Ray. If we break through, we can land a Shadow Ball to immediately take it out, but of course we get hit with Confusion. On the next turn, Ghastly uses Destiny Bond. And of course, this time we snap out of Confusion, Weedy lands a Shadow Ball, and since that immediately KOs the Ghastly, our beloved Weedy goes down with it. I was so looking forward to using Weedy, especially after all the EV training I did with him. If we didn't hit ourselves with Confusion the first time and take out the Ghastly right away, or if we did hit ourselves the second time and give ourselves a bit of extra time to avoid the Destiny Bond, we could have kept Weedy. But this unfortunate sequence of events led to his death, and ultimately I could have known better that a Ghastly would have Destiny Bond. So, rest in peace Weedy. Hope there's plenty of leftovers for you in the Pokemon afterlife. Out of spite, I skip the rest of the gym trainers and head straight to Sabrina, not wanting to risk another death out of a careless mistake. Although, with Captain Crunch on our team, this isn't a particularly difficult fight. Return cleanly knocks out both the Kadabra and Mr. Mime. It just barely misses out on the KO on Venomoth, who then goes for Supersonic, but thankfully it misses. Definitely could have been bad there, but I'm glad we dodged it. After a Hyper Potion, 2 more returns take it out. Last is Alakazam, and I go for Return, and I was surprised to see that Captain Crunch outsped the Alakazam, but I'm not complaining. Return cleanly takes it out, and we've got our 6th gym badge. Funny how one of the gym trainers actually gave me more trouble than the actual gym leader, but so it goes. At this point, I head down to Route 19 where I can fish up some new encounters.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
One of them is a Tentacool, which I catch and nickname Special K. On Route 20, I fish up a Psyduck and name it Smacks. In the Seafoam Islands, I find a Zubat and name it Booberry. Upon arriving in Cinnabar Island, I finally revive my Helix fossil and get ourselves an Ammonite named Chips Ahoy. In the Pokemon Mansion, we finally get ourselves a Growlithe, naming it Mini-Wheat, and this time it doesn't have Roar. And then I backtrack to the power plant where we find ourselves a Magneton, which thankfully I catch and nickname Crave. Hey, the boys and I were gonna hit up Chipotle if you wanted to join. Alright, fine, be rude about it. At this point, I'm starting to think about what team members I want to carry with me through the rest of the game, as Blaine and Giovanni can be dealt with in similar ways, and we have a multitude of encounters anyway. I decide to level up Special K into a Tentacruel, a Pokemon which I never really got to utilize before, so this'll be cool. Or should I say, Tentacool... Cruel... Whatever. I also add Crave the Magneton to the team, giving us some Steel-type bulk. And while I love how useful Fruit Loop has been to us, he's not quite as strong or bulky as Arcanine, so they're taking the bench. Although he'll be good to have as backup just in case. I also removed Cheerio since we don't quite need him as much moving forward. Thank you for your valiant effort, Cheerio. You'll always be a part of a nutritionally balanced breakfast in our hearts. After clearing through the Cinnabar Island gym with my superior knowledge on Pokemon, it's time to take on the Fire-type leader Blaine. I hope you have your seatbelts fastened, because this is gonna be a bumpy ride. Heading back to Viridian City, Special K and Captain Crunch are able to clear through the trainers with relative ease. And while Eevee grinding before taking on Giovanni, this happened. Yup, a shiny Ekans. This never happens to me, so with this being a regular hardcore Nuzlocke and not a mono type challenge, I of course go ahead and catch it. Unfortunately, I can't say I use it since Arbok itself leaves a lot to be desired, but still really cool to catch a shiny, especially on this run in particular. I nickname it Pokemon because, yes, it is a cereal, and I might as well give that name to my one and only shiny in this run. I waited until level 49 to evolve Miniwheat, as this is the level he can get Flamethrower as a Growlithe and get Extreme Speed as Arcanine upon evolution. So with a Firestone, we evolve him into the shoulda coulda woulda been legendary Arcanine. The last gym leader is Giovanni, and between Special K and Captain Crunch, we've got a pretty solid plan. He leads with Rhyhorn and I lead with Special K. Special K definitely has enough power to cleanly one-shot his Rhyhorn, his Dugtrio, and his second Rhyhorn, which I'm not entirely sure why that's his ace and it's not a Rhydon, but whatever. Then Nidoqueen comes out, and there is a chance that Surf doesn't kill, plus Nidoqueen has Earthquake, so I switched to Captain Crunch for the Intimidate, and my prediction was correct as she went for Earthquake. I go for Water Pulse, which brings her over half, plus we get the Confusion, which is nice, although she breaks through Confusion for Body Slam. But thankfully no paralysis. He then used a full heal, which is funny, so a second Water Pulse takes her out. Last up is Nidoking, and I pretty much use the same strategy here. I used Water Pulse, which brings Nidoking into the red, and then goes for Thrash, but thankfully no crit. Since he's locked into Thrash, he can't use a Hyper Potion, so a second Water Pulse takes out the Nidoking, winning us our 8th and final gym badge. Let's go. Our battle with that guy on Route 22 didn't give us any real issues, so we can mostly skip that. I spent some time stealing some type boosting items off wild Pokemon. Seriously, Team Rocket should just make me an executive at this point. Looking for berries and other useful items, and doing an amulet coin grind on Route 15 in particular, where these beauty trainers, for example, give you over $4,000 each. This ended up being a great way to get enough cash to acquire TMs at the game corner while grinding my Pokemon up to the Elite 4 level cap. Speaking of which, here's the crew we'll be rolling with for the Elite 4 Gauntlet. We've got Crave the Magneton with some steely bulk and electrical power. Good old Captain Crunch the Gyarados, who now has Dragon Dance and will fire off deadly attacks with Return and Stab Surf. Miniwheat the Arcanine, who will show some great fiery power and speed. Kicks the Vileplume, who has been an invaluable replacement to our beloved Kashi since Vermilion. Special K, who will provide great support as a fast-moving special attacker, and the beast himself, Cocoa Puff, who has the power to decimate Mons with Earthquake and Rock Slide. Do these crunchy sweet breakfast snacks have what it takes to become champions? Without any further words necessary, let's do battle. First up is Lorelei, and she's one of the main reasons I brought Crave onto the team. A magnet boosted Thunderbolt is enough to cleanly take out her Dugong, Cloyster, Slowbro, and even Lapras in one hit, which surprised me. Against her Jinx, a Thunderbolt leaves her in the red. Jinx retaliates with an Ice Punch, but thankfully no freeze. So after a few heals and attacks, we're able to take out the Jinx, handing us a decisive victory against the first Elite Four member. Next up is Bruno, and this is where I'm going to try to set up a sweep with Captain Crunch. He leads with his very fighting type Onix, and I lead with Kicks. A quad effective Bullet Seed easily takes out the Stone Serpent. The next step of my plan largely depends on who he sends out next, and it's Hitmonchan just as I hoped. I go for Stun Spore, which thankfully connects, plus we get a full paralysis. Hitmonlee has Limber, which prevents him from getting paralyzed, so if he came out next, I would have had to take him out with Kicks or pivot to someone else. But now, I can bring in Captain Crunch, who gets off an Intimidate, and Hitmonchan connects with the Rock Tomb for a chunk of damage and lowers our speed. I can start using Dragon Dance to boost our attack and counteract any speed drops from the Hitmonchan's Rock Tombs. It ends up being a back and forth with the help of a Citrus Berry I attached to Captain Crunch, but we end up getting off 5 Dragon Dances after being brought to 51 HP to put us at plus 5 attack and neutral speed due to the Rock Tombs. I have to start firing off returns, so I start with Hitmonchan, which takes it out in one hit. Next up is Machamp, and this is where I'm hoping that the plus 5 attack boosts will be enough to take it out, And thank breakfast it is. Hitmonlee then is taken out by return, and the second very fighting type Onix goes down to a Surf, ending the battle with Bruno. Agatha can always be pretty tricky. For some reason, she's the Elite Four member I'm most nervous for. She's got status moves left and right and has two powerful Gengars that can get out of hand, especially the one with Double Team. That Gengar comes out first, so I lead with Crave. I immediately go for Thunder Wave to paralyze it, and of course she goes for Double Team, but I had taught Crave Shockwave, which never misses, for this exact reason, and using it puts Gengar over half before she foolishly goes for a second Double Team. So, a second Shockwave is enough to take out the Gengar. The Gengar also had Toxic and Confuse Ray, but Crave is immune to poison, and I attached a Person Berry just in case. Next up is Haunter, and again I go for Paralysis. Haunter actually goes for a Curse, which makes it lose half of its own health to take out a quarter of mine each turn, but after the Curse damage, a Thunderbolt is enough to take it out. Golbat then comes out, and since it deals the least amount of damage to all my team, I saw this as an opportunity. I use Thunder Wave to paralyze it right away. I bring in Miniwheat, who gets off an Intimidate, which doesn't mean anything for Golbat's oncoming bite. I then set up a Substitute while Golbat again thankfully stays fully paralyzed. I then set up an Agility, thinking this is the only way I can outspeed Agatha's second Gengar later. So Golbat goes for Confuse Ray, which obviously does nothing. I then go for Flamethrower, which leaves Golbat on a sliver. Come on, Miniwheat. After Agatha heals with a full restore, I use Extreme Speed just for some damage before following up with a Flamethrower to take it out. Next up is Arbok, and I go for Flamethrower, which again leaves it with a sliver. This isn't great because then Arbok fires off a Sludge Bomb, which breaks my sub. Running some quick calculations reveals that Sludge Bomb will definitely break my sub again, but I also know that she'll most likely heal, so I go for Substitute, which brings me down to 69 HP. Nice. And she does heal, which honestly is best case scenario because now I can use Extreme Speed and Flamethrower to take it out, even though she does break my sub again in the process. Last up is her terrifying ace, the second Gengar. With the sub broken, Miniwheat is at risk to a death, so I decide to switch to Kicks as Gengar lands a Hypnosis, but I came prepared and attached a Chesto Berry to Kicks. I know this Gengar outspeeds me, so I hold my breath as she goes for Hypnosis, but it misses. Even luckier, we land a Stun Spore which paralyzes our final Pokemon. I then go for Giga Drain, despite it being resisted, for close to a quarter damage, and then Gengar stays fully paralyzed. I go for a second Giga Drain, which is just shy of half, then Gengar goes for another Hypnosis, but it misses. Gotta love 60% accurate moves. A third Giga Drain brings Gengar below half as Agatha goes on the offensive with Sludge Bomb for neutral damage, and then her Citrus Berry heals Gengar up close to half. Another Giga Drain brings Gengar just shy of being in the red, and then she finally lands a Hypnosis. I suppose it was only a matter of time. Wanting to give Kicks a break, I switched into Special K as Gengar goes for Nightmare, which obviously fails. A Surf then easily takes out the rest of Gengar's health, ending the battle against Agatha and her deathly poison types. Last up in the Elite Four is Lance, and he's the main reason I brought Special K. Having taught Special K Ice Beam, he'll be able to clear through most of Lance's team. However, I gotta take care of the leading Gyarados first, so I lead with Crave. We thankfully outspeed, and a quad-effective Thunderbolt is more than enough to wipe off the Gyarados from existence. Next in is Dragonair, and I know it has Shed Skin, but I go for Thunder Wave anyway so we can hopefully keep it paralyzed for as long as possible while switching in Special K. Dragonair then goes for Safeguard, which is such a foolish mistake, am I right? However, according to my calculations, an Ice Beam isn't necessarily a one-hit KO, and I really don't want this thing to paralyze Special K since it has Thunder Wave, so I go for Shockwave for a bit of chip while it stays fully paralyzed, but recovers with Shed Skin. I then make a dumb, foolish mistake and try to go for a Thunder Wave, which obviously fails because of its Safeguard. Dragonair then retaliates with Dragon Rage for exactly 40 damage. I figure we're at least in range for an Ice Beam kill, so I switch into Special K on a Dragon Rage. From there, Ice Beam is enough to take out the Dragonair. The Safeguard goes down as Lance sends in his second Dragonair. I go for Ice Beam, which cleanly takes it out in one hit. Phew! Next up is his ace, Dragonite, but with it being quad weak to ice type attacks, it doesn't stand a chance against Special K's oncoming Ice Beam. Aerodactyl is last, and I'm not 100% sure if we'll outspeed, but we do, and land a Surf, which takes out the Aerodactyl in one hit, giving us our victory against the Elite Four completely deathless. But we're not done yet. No. Last up is the guy that no one wants to be. That guy. It all comes down to this. My first attempt at a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokemon FireRed could be lost to the hands of a preteen with a jealousy complex. We've worked so hard to get to this point. It's now or never. My 6 team members strap up their bootlaces, not only for the battle of a lifetime to claim the championship, but for what has got to be one of the most epic champion battle songs ever.
John C.
Game over.
He starts off with Pidgeot and I lead with Crave. In case the Pidgeot outspeeds and goes for Sand Attack, I go for Shockwave, but we outspeed anyway and take out the large chicken one more time. He then goes ahead and sends in his Charizard? I really thought he would go for Rhydon with the 4-time super effective Earthquake, but I guess that guy has other plans. It feels too risky to leave Crave out there, so I take the opportunity to give a different team member a chance in the spotlight. One that had been sitting in the sidelines for all of the Elite Four, but now it's his time to shine. Cocoa Puff. He comes in on a resisted Fire Blast, but it does way more than I was expecting. That naive nature really came to bite us in the ass. I'm at risk to a crit, but I decide to stay in as he goes for another Fire Blast, but it misses. We then connect with a Rock Slide and take down the monstrous ace immediately. I was yelling for joy at this moment. The legend of Cocoa Puff lives on. He then sends in Rhydon, and I switch in Captain Crunch on an anticipated Earthquake. A quad effective Surf is enough to take out the Rhydon in one fell swoop. Next up is Alakazam, and I immediately go for Return, but it leaves the Alakazam on a sliver as it sets up a Reflect. I know he'll heal, so I simply go for another Return, which doesn't even bring Alakazam to half thanks to the Reflect. I then switch to Bite, which again leaves Alakazam with a sliver, then he goes for Psychic, which brings us to almost half. I then go for another Bite as that guy uses a full restore. I go for another Bite to get off more damage, but we get a critical hit to take him out before he can get another attack. That timed out perfectly as Exeggutor comes in and the Reflect goes down. I switch into Mini-Wheat, who gets hit by an Egg Bomb, but Flamethrower takes out the Exeggutor in one hit. Last up on that guy's team is a Gyarados of his own. Figuring that a critical hit Hydro Pump might deal a lot of damage to most of my Pokemon, I switch to Special K, who tanks it well. I then go for Toxic on the Gyarados as he retaliates with a Dragon Rage. Then, we go for a classic Toxic style, baby. I use Protect to add on a bit of toxic damage, then I go for Ice Beam to deal some damage to Gyarados as it lands another Dragon Rage. I then go for Protect again for more toxic damage, but unfortunately it puts Gyarados into healing range, so on the next turn that guy uses another full restore. An Ice Beam does another chunk of damage, then I set up another Toxic, Gyarados goes for another Thrash, but it's enough to take Special K down. I was pretty bummed about this. Obviously it would have been really cool to make it through the Elite Four and Champion deathless, but having made it to the Champion with all 6 Pokemon is still a really nice accomplishment. Rest in peace, Special K. I can then bring in Crave, who outspeeds and cleanly finishes off the Gyarados with a single Thunderbolt, winning us the battle and the entire run on my very first attempt. I had so much fun with this challenge. Pokemon was one of the defining elements of my childhood, and getting to play this again with hardcore Nuzlocke rules in place was such an enlightening experience for me. I've always loved how there's always such a replayability factor to these games, and I'm looking forward to trying out some mono-type challenges and other forms of hardcore Nuzlockes. If you enjoyed watching this, it would mean a lot to me if you liked the video and subscribed to the channel. I had a lot of fun doing this challenge and making this video, and I'm excited to learn more as a Nuzlocker and a content creator. Thanks so much for watching my silly video. My name is Zerna, and I'll see you in the next challenge. Look, I'm not saying you're a bad friend. I'm just saying that you're a little absent, and it would be nice to have a little bit of communication from you. Anything at all.